The instructions had been very clear. "You will sleep on the floor beside his bed," Lady Thornwood had said, her lip curling with distaste. "Like the dog you are. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not meet his eyes. And when he tires of you, which he will, because what could a beast possibly want with something as pathetic as you will crawl back here and resume your duties, assuming you survive." Ivy had not argued. She had learned long ago that arguing with the Thornwoods only earned her bruises. 20 years old, and she had spent 18 of them as property of the Thornwood family. Her parents had sold her to pay a debt when she was 2, or so she'd been told. She had no memory of them, no knowledge of whether they were alive or dead, no hope that anyone in the world had ever wanted her. The Thornwoods certainly hadn't. She was a kitchen servant, the lowest of the low, given the worst tasks and the smallest portions, and a thin blanket on the stone floor of the cellar. She had never slept in a bed. She had never worn clothes without patches. She had never, not once in 18 years, been treated as anything other than an inconvenience to be tolerated. And now she was being sent to the Lycan king as a gift. Not a real gift, of course. An insult. The Thornwoods owed tribute to the king, and instead of sending gold or goods or a proper bride, they had sent Ivy, a nothing, a nobody. A message that said, "This is what we think of you." The carriage that brought her to the palace was finer than anything she'd ever ridden in, but she spent the journey curled in the corner, trying to make herself as small as possible. She didn't know what awaited her. She only knew it wouldn't be good. Lycan King. The words echoed in her mind like a death knell. She'd heard stories. Everyone had. He was ancient, centuries old. He could tear a man apart with his bare hands. He had claws and fangs and eyes that glowed in the dark. Some said he ate human flesh. Some said he kept a harem of women who were never seen again. Ivy didn't know what to believe. She only knew that she'd been sent to sleep on his floor like a dog, and that whatever happened next was beyond her control. The palace was enormous, bigger than the entire Thornwood estate, bigger than anything she'd ever imagined. Guards escorted her through endless corridors of polished marble and glittering chandeliers, past tapestries and paintings and doorways that led to rooms she would never see. Finally, they stopped before a pair of massive oak doors. "The king's chambers," one guard said. "He's expecting you." The doors swung open, and Ivy was pushed inside. The room was warm. That was the first thing she noticed. A fire crackling in a hearth, large enough to stand in, filling the space with golden light and blessed heat. After 18 years of sleeping in a cold cellar, the warmth hit her like a physical force. The second thing she noticed was the bed. It was enormous. 4 posts carved from dark wood, curtains of deep blue velvet, mattress piled high with furs and pillows. It looked soft. It looked comfortable. It looked like something from a dream she'd never dared to have. The third thing she noticed was him. The Lycan king stood by the window, his back to her, staring out at the night sky. He was tall, taller than any man she'd ever seen, with broad shoulders that strained against his dark shirt and hair as black as midnight that fell past his collar. Even from behind, even motionless, he radiated power. The kind of power that made her want to drop to her knees and beg for mercy. She did exactly that. Her knees hit the floor before she'd consciously decided to kneel. Her head bowed, her hands pressed flat against the cold stone, her whole body trembling. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," she whispered. I know I'm not what you expected. The Thornwoods sent me as tribute, and I know it's an insult, and I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, please don't." Stop. The word was quiet, but it silenced her instantly. She heard him turn, heard footsteps approaching, and squeezed her eyes shut. Here it came. The punishment. The rage. Whatever he was going to do to her for the crime of existing. The footsteps stopped directly in front of her. Look at me. She couldn't. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but kneel there and shake. Please. His voice was softer now. Look at me. Something in his tone, something that almost sounded like gentleness, made her lift her head. His eyes were gold, not brown, not amber, but pure molten gold, catching the firelight and reflecting it back like coins. They should have been terrifying. Everything about him should have been terrifying. The sharp angles of his face, the power coiled in his frame, the sheer, overwhelming presence of him. But he was looking at her with something that wasn't anger, wasn't disgust, wasn't even the cold indifference she'd expected. He was looking at her with concern. "You're shaking," he said. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty." "Don't apologize." He crouched down, bringing himself closer to her level, and she flinched instinctively. He went still. "I'm not going to hurt you. Do you understand?" "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't understand. None of this made sense. "The Thornwoods," she managed. They told me to sleep on the floor, beside your bed. Like a—" She couldn't finish. The humiliation of it choked her. Something flickered in his golden eyes, something hot and dangerous. "They told you to sleep on the floor," he repeated slowly. "Yes, Your Majesty. They said that's what I was for, to sleep at your feet like a dog." For a long moment, he was silent. She could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands had curled into fists at his sides. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "What else did they tell you?" "That I wasn't to speak unless spoken to, that I wasn't to meet your eyes, that when you tired of me, I would be sent back to resume my duties." She swallowed hard. "Assuming I survived." The sound he made was not quite a growl, but close. It vibrated through the air, primal and furious, and Ivy curled in on herself, certain she'd said something wrong. But when she dared to look at him again, his anger wasn't directed at her. "The Thornwoods," he said, "will answer for this." "Your Majesty?" "They sent you here as an insult, as a message." He rose to his full height, and even from her place on the floor, she had to crane her neck to see his face. "But I don't see an insult when I look at you. I see a woman who has been mistreated her entire life. I see someone who deserves kindness, not cruelty." He extended his hand toward her. "Get up, please." She stared at his hand like it might bite her. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will, in time." His hand remained steady, waiting. "But for now, just know this. You will not sleep on the floor. Not tonight. Not ever. My bed is large enough for both of us, and you will sleep there, in comfort and warmth and safety. But I'm nobody. I'm nothing. I'm just— You're a person." He said it simply, like it was obvious, like it wasn't the most revolutionary thing anyone had ever said to her. "And in my kingdom, people are not made to sleep on floors like animals." Slowly, hesitantly, she reached up and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and he pulled her gently to her feet. She swayed, light-headed from shock and exhaustion and the sheer impossibility of what was happening. "When did you last eat?" he asked. I don't remember. Yesterday, maybe. The day before." That dangerous flicker returned to his eyes. Food will be brought immediately, and a bath, and clean clothes. He released her hand but didn't step back. You're safe here, Ivy. Whatever the Thornwoods told you, whatever you've been taught to expect, none of it applies anymore. You're under my protection now. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Why would you protect me? You don't even know me. He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his golden gaze. Because the moment you walked through that door, he said softly, something in me recognized something in you, and I've been waiting a very long time to find out what that means. True to his word, food arrived within minutes. Ivy sat at a small table by the fire, staring at the spread before her with something approaching disbelief. Roasted chicken, fresh bread still warm from the oven, cheese and fruits, and a bowl of soup that smelled like heaven. More food than she'd seen in a week, laid out as if it were nothing. Eat, the king said from across the room, where he was speaking quietly with a servant. As much as you want. There's more if you need it. She picked up a piece of bread with trembling fingers and took a small bite. The flavor exploded on her tongue, butter and salt and warmth, and she had to stop herself from shoving the entire loaf into her mouth. Slowly, he cautioned, returning to sit across from her. Your stomach won't be used to rich food. Small bites. She nodded, forcing herself to chew carefully, even though every instinct screamed at her to eat as fast as possible before someone took it away. What's your name? She asked suddenly, then immediately flinched. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I wasn't supposed to speak unless. You can speak whenever you want. His voice was patient. And you can ask me anything. My name is Ronan. Ronan. She turned the name over in her mind. It didn't sound like a monster's name. It sounded almost gentle. How old are you, Ivy? 20. You're. She caught herself. Ronan. Something flickered in his eyes at the sound of his name on her lips. And you've been with the Thornwoods your entire life? Since I was 2, my parents sold me to pay a debt. She said it flatly, without emotion. It was simply a fact of her existence, like the color of her hair or the calluses on her hands. I don't remember them. I don't know if they're alive or dead. And the Thornwoods treated you as a servant? As less than a servant. She took another small bite of bread, not meeting his eyes. The servants had beds. They had days off. They were paid wages, even if small ones. She shrugged. I was property. There's a difference. The silence that followed was heavy. When she finally glanced up, Ronan's jaw was tight, his hands flat on the table as if he was physically restraining himself from violence. I'm not telling you this to make you angry, she said quickly. I'm just. You asked, and I know. He took a breath, visibly forcing himself to relax. I asked because I want to understand. I want to know who you are, where you came from, what you've survived. His golden eyes met hers. And I want you to know that none of it was your fault, or what you deserved. She didn't know how to respond to that. It went against everything she'd been taught, everything she'd internalized over 18 years of being told she was worthless. So she just nodded and returned her attention to the food. After she'd eaten, slowly, carefully, until her shrunken stomach couldn't hold any more, a bath was drawn in an adjoining room. Real hot water, steaming and fragrant with oils, clean towels thicker than any blanket she'd ever owned. Take as long as you need, Ronan said, staying carefully on the other side of the doorway. There are clothes laid out for you. When you're ready, we can talk more. Or you can sleep. Whatever you need. She didn't trust it. She couldn't. Kindness like this didn't exist, not in her experience. There had to be a catch, a price, something he wanted that she would be forced to give. But the water was warm, and she was so tired, and for just a moment she let herself sink into it and pretend that this was real. When she emerged, wrapped in a soft robe that probably cost more than everything she'd ever owned combined, she found Ronan by the fire again. He'd changed into simpler clothes, loose trousers, a dark shirt unlaced at the throat, and somehow looked less like a terrifying king and more like a man. "Better?" he asked. "Yes, thank you." She hovered near the bathing chamber door, uncertain what to do, where to go. The bed loomed in her peripheral vision, vast and intimidating. "I still don't understand why you're doing this." "I told you." Something in me recognized. "I know what you said. I don't understand what it means." He was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Then he gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, please." She sat, perching on the edge of the chair like she might need to flee at any moment. "Have you heard of mate bonds?" he asked. She shook her head. "Lycans don't love the way humans do. We don't choose our partners through courtship or convenience or arrangement." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes intent on hers. "We have fated mates. One person in all the world who is meant for us, chosen by fate or the gods or whatever power shapes such things. When we meet that person, we know. We feel it." Her heart was beating too fast. "And you think I'm—" "I know you are." He said it simply, without drama or demand. "I felt it the moment you walked through that door. The pull, the recognition, the sense that I'd been waiting for you my entire life without knowing it." She should run. She should laugh. She should tell him he was insane, that she was nobody, that fate would never choose someone like her for someone like him. Instead, she heard herself ask, "What does that mean? For me?" "That's up to you." He sat back, giving her space. "I won't force you into anything. I won't claim you or demand anything from you. The bond doesn't work that way, not for me. I want a partner, not a possession." His lips curved slightly. "You've been possessed enough for one lifetime." "Then what do you want?" "I want you to stay, to let me show you what it means to be valued, to be cared for, to be safe. I want you to have time, as much time as you need, to decide if you could ever want me back." He held her gaze. "And if you decide you don't, if you decide you want to leave and never see me again, I'll let you go. I'll give you money and protection and whatever you need to start a new life. I'll suffer for it. The bond makes separation painful. But I'll do it, because your choice matters more than my comfort." She stared at him. "You'd let me leave, even though you believe I'm your mate?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because you've never had a choice in anything." His voice was soft, but fierce. "Your parents sold you. The Thornwoods owned you. You were sent here without being asked. For once in your life, someone should let you choose." Her eyes burned. She blinked rapidly, refusing to cry. She'd trained herself out of tears years ago. Tears only invited mockery or punishment. "I don't know how to choose," she whispered. "I don't know how to do any of this." "Then we'll figure it out together." He rose from his chair and crossed to the bed, pulling back the covers on one side. "For tonight, you sleep. You rest. Tomorrow we can talk more. Or not talk at all. Whatever you need." She stood on unsteady legs and walked toward the bed. It felt like walking toward a cliff's edge, like one wrong step would send her tumbling into an abyss she couldn't escape. "You'll sleep here too?" she asked. "In the same bed?" "Only if you're comfortable with it. I can sleep in the chair." She looked at the chair, then at the bed, then at him. The chair looked hard and uncomfortable. He was offering to sleep there for her sake, for her comfort. No one had ever been uncomfortable on her behalf before. "The bed is fine," she said quietly. It's your bed. I'm the intruder." "You're not an intruder. You're a guest." He moved to the other side of the bed, keeping distance between them. "And someday, if you choose it, you'll be much more than that." She climbed into the bed, sinking into softness she'd never imagined. The pillows were like clouds. The blankets were warm and heavy and smelled of cedar and something wild, something that was uniquely him. Ronan settled on the far side, careful not to touch her, and the fire crackled softly as it burned low. "Good night, Ivy," he said into the darkness. "Good night," she whispered back. She didn't sleep, not for a long time. She lay there in the warmth and the safety and the impossible gentleness of it all, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But the only sound was his steady breathing, and the only feeling was the strange, terrifying warmth spreading through her chest. It felt like hope. She didn't trust it. But she couldn't quite make it stop. She woke screaming. The nightmare had been the old one, the cellar, the darkness, the sound of the door locking above her. Lady Thornwood's voice echoing down the stairs. "Perhaps a few days without food will teach you to be grateful for what you have." The cold seeping into her bones, the rats skittering in the corners, the certainty that she would die there and no one would care. Ivy sat up, gasping, her heart slamming against her ribs, her skin slick with sweat. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The bed was too soft, the room too warm, nothing made sense. Then she felt the hand on her shoulder, and she flinched violently away. "It's me." Ronan's voice, low and calm. "It's just me. You're safe." Safe. The word cut through her panic like sunlight through fog. She was in his chambers, in his bed. He was sitting beside her, golden eyes bright in the darkness, carefully not touching her after she'd pulled away. "I'm sorry," she managed, her voice ragged. "I didn't mean to wake you. Don't apologize. Ever." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away again, and when she didn't, he let his hand rest gently on her arm. "Nightmare." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Do you want to talk about it?" She shook her head. Then, surprising herself, she changed her mind. "The cellar," she said. "Lady Thornwood used to lock me in the cellar when she was displeased with me, sometimes for days. No food, no water, no light." Her voice was flat, distant, like she was reciting facts about someone else. "I was 8 the first time. I thought I was going to die. I screamed until my voice gave out. But no one came." Ronan was very still beside her. She could feel the tension radiating from him, the tightly leashed fury that he seemed to carry whenever she spoke about her past. "How often?" he asked quietly. "I lost count. 12 times? More? It became normal. A punishment I knew to expect." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The worst part wasn't the dark or the cold or the hunger. It was knowing that no one would come, that I could scream and cry and beg, and no one in the world cared enough to help me. "Ivy." His voice cracked on her name. "I learned not to scream." she continued, because now that she'd started, she couldn't seem to stop. I learned not to cry. I learned to make myself small and quiet and invisible, because invisible things don't get punished. Invisible things don't get locked in cellars. She finally looked at him, and her eyes were dry, even though something inside her was breaking. I've been invisible my whole life. It was the only way to survive. For a long moment, Ronan didn't speak. Then he shifted closer, and his hand came up to cup her face. Gently, so gently, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. "You're not invisible to me," he said. "You have never been invisible to me. From the moment you walked through that door, you were the only thing I could see. You don't know me. You don't know. I know enough." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I know that you've survived things that would have broken most people. I know that 18 years of cruelty didn't destroy your spirit, didn't make you hard or cruel in return. I know that you're terrified right now, and you're still here, still talking to me, still letting me touch you." His golden eyes held hers. "That's not weakness, Ivy. That's the kind of strength most people can only dream of." She shook her head. "I'm not strong. I'm just good at enduring." Enduring is strength. Surviving is strength. Keeping your heart open when the world has given you every reason to close it, that is strength. He leaned closer, and she could feel his breath warm against her skin. "You are not nothing. You are not worthless. You are not invisible. You are remarkable and resilient, and so incredibly brave." "I don't feel brave." Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's being afraid and still moving forward. His hand slid from her cheek to the back of her neck, holding her steady. "You've been moving forward your whole life, Ivy, against impossible odds, against people who should have protected you and didn't, against a world that told you every single day that you didn't matter." His forehead pressed against hers. "You matter. Do you hear me? You matter." She was shaking. She hadn't realized it until now, but her whole body was trembling, and tears were streaming down her face. Tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed in years. "I don't know how to believe that," she whispered. "Then I'll believe it for you. Every day. Until you can believe it yourself." He pulled back just enough to look at her, and his expression was so open, so vulnerable, that it stole her breath. "I've been alive for 300 years, Ivy. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've watched countless lives begin and end. And in all that time, I have never met anyone like you." "That's because you've never met someone so damaged." "No." His voice was fierce. "Because I've never met someone so worth knowing, so worth waiting for, so worth loving." The word hung between them. Loving. "You can't love me," she said. "You've known me for one day. I've known you were coming for 300 years." He smiled, and it was the saddest, most hopeful thing she'd ever seen. One day is just the beginning. She didn't know who moved first. Maybe she leaned in. Maybe he did. But suddenly his mouth was a breath away from hers, and her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. "Tell me to stop, and I will. I'll never bring it up again." She should tell him to stop. She should push him away, put distance between them, protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak. Instead, she closed the gap between them. The kiss was soft, gentle, a question rather than a demand. His lips brushed against hers like he was asking permission with every touch, and when she pressed closer, when she reached up and fisted her hands in his shirt. He made a sound low in his throat that vibrated through her entire body. He pulled back before she was ready, breathing hard, his golden eyes almost glowing in the darkness. "We should stop," he said roughly. "You're shaken. You're vulnerable. I won't take advantage." "You're not taking advantage." Her voice surprised her, steady, certain. "I wanted that. I want—" She faltered. "I don't know what I want, but I know I don't want you to stop touching me." Something fierce and tender passed across his face. Without a word, he shifted and pulled her against his chest, wrapping his arms around her and tucking her head beneath his chin. "Then I won't," he said. "Not tonight. Not ever. Unless you tell me to." She lay there in his arms, surrounded by his warmth and his scent and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. She was falling for him. She knew it with a certainty that should have terrified her. And it did terrify her. But not enough to make her pull away. A week passed. 7 days of warmth and safety, and the slow, tentative unfurling of something Ivy had never experienced before. Happiness. She woke each morning in Ronan's arms, wrapped in blankets that smelled like him. She ate meals that filled her stomach and didn't have to be rationed. She wore clothes that fit properly, soft fabrics against skin that had only ever known rough wool. And every night, she fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat, steady and sure beneath her ear. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He simply loved her. In 1,000 small ways, 1,000 gentle touches, 1,000 patient moments when he let her set the pace. She was starting to believe it might be real. Then the Thornwoods arrived. She was in the library when she heard the commotion, raised voices in the entrance hall, the sound of boots on marble, a woman's shrill demands echoing through the corridors. She knew that voice. She would know it anywhere, in her nightmares and her waking hours alike. Lady Thornwood. Ivy's blood turned to ice. Her hands began to shake, and she gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. They'd come for her. Of course they had. She'd been a fool to think she could escape, a fool to believe that anything good could last. She should hide. She should run. She should make herself small and invisible, the way she'd always done. Instead, she forced herself to walk toward the entrance hall. Ronan was already there when she arrived, standing at the top of the grand staircase with his arms crossed and his golden eyes blazing. Below him, in the center of the marble floor, stood Lord and Lady Thornwood, flanked by 2 of their household guards. "Demand that you return our property immediately," Lady Thornwood was saying, her voice shrill with outrage. "The girl was sent as tribute, not as a permanent gift. We only intended for you to use her for a few nights, and then she was to be returned to us." "Use her?" Ronan's voice was deadly quiet. "You sent a human being to me, told her to sleep on the floor like a dog, and you expected me to use her." "She's a servant, less than a servant. She's property. We own her, and we want her back." "You own nothing." Ronan descended 1 step, then another, and even from across the hall, Ivy could feel the power radiating from him. "Ivy is under my protection. She is not property. She is not a tribute, and she will not be returning to your household." Lord Thornwood stepped forward, his face red with barely contained fury. "Now see here, Your Majesty. We have papers, legal documents proving our ownership of the girl. Her parents sold her to us when she was a child, fair and legal, and—" "I don't care about your papers." Another step down. "I don't care about your laws. In my kingdom, people are not property. In my kingdom, a child cannot be sold to pay debts." And in my kingdom. His voice dropped to a growl that echoed off the marble walls. Anyone who abuses a defenseless girl for 18 years answers to me. Lady Thornwood's eyes found Ivy, standing frozen at the edge of the hall. Her lip curled with familiar contempt. "There you are," she said. "Come here, girl. We're taking you home." Ivy couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stand there, paralyzed by 18 years of conditioning, 18 years of learning that disobedience meant pain. "Ivy," Ronan's voice, soft but steady. "You don't have to go anywhere." "She belongs to us," Lady Thornwood snapped. "She's been ours since she was 2 years old. She doesn't know how to be anything else. She belongs to no one but herself." Ronan had reached the bottom of the stairs now. He stood between Ivy and the Thornwoods like a wall, like a shield, like everything she'd never had. "And she can speak for herself. Ivy—" He turned to look at her, and his golden eyes were gentle, despite the fury simmering beneath the surface. "What do you want?" What did she want? For 20 years, no one had ever asked her that question. She had never been allowed to want anything. Her entire existence had been about survival, about endurance, about making herself small enough to avoid notice. But she wasn't small anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was standing in a palace, wearing silk, loved by a king who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in all the world. "I want to stay," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the hall. Lady Thornwood's face twisted. "You ungrateful little. After everything we did for you, everything we gave you. You gave me nothing." Ivy's voice grew stronger, steadier. "You locked me in cellars. You starved me. You told me I was worthless every single day of my life." She stepped forward, moving to stand beside Ronan, and something in her chest cracked open, something that had been locked away for 18 years. "You made me believe I was nothing, that I deserved pain, that I should be grateful for scraps and abuse." "Ivy," Lady Thornwood started. "I'm not finished." The words came out sharp, fierce, surprising even herself. "I spent 18 years being afraid of you, 18 years trying to be invisible so you couldn't hurt me, but I'm not afraid anymore." She reached out and took Ronan's hand, feeling his fingers close around hers like an anchor. "I choose to stay. I choose him. And I choose to never see either of you again." Silence fell over the hall. Lord Thornwood's face had gone purple with rage. "You can't do this. We have rights." "You have nothing." Ronan's voice was cold as winter. "Your lands are hereby forfeit to the crown. Your titles are revoked. Your household will be investigated for violations of the realm's laws regarding the treatment of servants and the trafficking of children." He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Ivy had ever seen. "You came here expecting to reclaim your property. Instead, you've lost everything. I suggest you leave before I decide that exile isn't punishment enough." Lady Thornwood opened her mouth, perhaps to argue, perhaps to beg. But Lord Thornwood grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the door. Within moments they were gone, their guards scrambling after them. The silence stretched. Then Ronan turned to her, and his expression shifted from cold fury to something unbearably tender. "You were magnificent," he said softly. Ivy was shaking. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was fading, leaving her trembling and raw. "I can't believe I did that," she whispered. I've never stood up to them. To anyone." "You did more than stand up to them." He cupped her face in his hands, tilting it up to meet his eyes. You chose yourself. You claimed your own freedom. You were brave, Ivy. So incredibly brave. Her eyes burned. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. Someday you'll believe that. He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. I'm so proud of you. I'm so honored that you chose to stay. I'll always choose to stay. The words came out before she could stop them, raw and honest and terrifying in their certainty. I love you, Ronan. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how. But I love you. His breath caught. For a moment, he was perfectly still. Then he kissed her. This kiss was nothing like the gentle brush of lips from before. This was fierce, claiming, a declaration of everything he felt. His hands slid into her hair, tilting her head back, and she melted into him with a sound that was half sob, half sigh. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his golden eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you, he said roughly. I have loved you since the moment you walked through my door. I will love you until the stars burn out and beyond. You are my mate, my heart, my everything. Then I'm yours, she whispered, completely, forever. He pulled her into his arms and held her like he would never let go. And for the first time in her life, Ivy believed that forever might actually be possible. The wedding was held 1 month later, on a crisp autumn morning when the leaves burned gold and red across the palace grounds. Ivy stood before the mirror in her chambers. Her chambers now connected to Ronan's by a door that was never locked, and barely recognized the woman staring back at her. The gown was ivory silk, embroidered with golden thread that caught the light like captured sunlight. Her dark hair had been swept up and woven with tiny white flowers, and around her throat hung a pendant of amber, warm against her skin. She looked like a queen. She was about to become one. A soft knock at the door. May I come in? She smiled at Ronan's voice. It's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding. That's a human superstition. Lycans have better sense. The door opened and he stepped inside, already dressed in his formal black, and stopped short when he saw her. Gods above. Is something wrong? Wrong? He crossed to her in 3 strides, his golden eyes blazing with something that made her heart skip. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I'm trying to remember how to breathe. She laughed, still marveling at how easily laughter came now, how natural it felt after 20 years of silence. Flatterer. Truth-teller. He took her hands in his, raised them to his lips, and pressed a kiss to each palm. Are you ready? I think so. She squeezed his fingers. I never thought I'd have this. Any of this. A month ago, I was sleeping on a cellar floor, and now you're about to become my queen. His voice was soft. My partner. My equal in all things. It doesn't seem real. It's real. He cupped her face, tilting it up to meet his eyes. This is your life now, Ivy. Warmth instead of cold. Softness instead of stone. Love instead of cruelty. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You deserve every bit of it. You always have. The ceremony was held in the great hall, filled with nobles and dignitaries from across the realm. Ivy walked down the aisle on legs that trembled only slightly, her eyes fixed on Ronan's face, on the love that shone from his golden gaze like a beacon. The vows were ancient, spoken in the old tongue of the Lycans, promises of protection and partnership, of running together through all the storms life might bring. When Ronan slid the ring onto her finger, a band of gold set with a single amber stone, She felt something click into place inside her, like the final piece of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving. "I now pronounce you bound," the officiant declared. "King and queen, mates and partners, from now until forever." Ronan kissed her, and the hall erupted in cheers. The feast that followed was magnificent, more food than Ivy had ever seen, music and dancing and laughter echoing off the vaulted ceilings. She sat at the high table beside her husband, her king, and watched as noble after noble approached to pay their respects. Then a familiar face appeared in the crowd. Lady Thornwood. She was diminished now, stripped of her titles, her lands reduced to a single small estate on the far edges of the realm. The investigation Ronan had ordered had revealed years of abuse, of servants mistreated and children exploited, and the Thornwoods' reputation had been destroyed. They were pariahs, shunned by polite society, their name synonymous with cruelty. And now Lady Thornwood stood before the high table, forced by protocol to pay respects to the new queen, the queen who had once been her kitchen servant, her property. The irony was exquisite. "Your Majesties?" Lady Thornwood said through gritted teeth. She couldn't quite bring herself to curtsy properly, but she bent her head in something that approximated respect. "Congratulations on your union." Ivy looked at her. This woman who had locked her in cellars, who had starved her, who had called her worthless every day for 18 years. She could destroy her with a word. Ronan would do it gladly if she asked. But she thought of all the years she'd spent being afraid, being small, being invisible. And she realized that Lady Thornwood had no power over her anymore. Not because Ivy was now a queen, but because she had stopped believing the lies. "Thank you, Lady Thornwood," she said calmly. "I hope the journey here wasn't too difficult. I understand your circumstances have changed." Lady Thornwood's face went white, then red. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I remember the cellar," Ivy continued, her voice steady. "I remember every day of those 18 years, but I don't hate you for it. I pity you, because you had the chance to be kind, and you chose cruelty, and now you have to live with that choice for the rest of your life." She turned away, dismissing the woman who had once held her entire world in her cruel hands. "That was magnificent," Ronan murmured in her ear. "I learned from the best." That night, in chambers that were now truly theirs, Ronan held her like she was precious beyond measure. And when he loved her, gently at first, then with a fierce tenderness that left her breathless, she finally understood what it meant to be cherished. Not for what she could do or what she could endure, but simply for who she was. "I love you," she whispered in the darkness afterward, curled against his chest. "I love you," he answered, pressing a kiss to her hair. "More than words, more than breath, more than 300 years of searching could have prepared me for." 2 years later, Ivy stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching her daughter sleep. She was 18 months old now, with her father's golden eyes and her mother's dark hair. They had named her Rose, for the flowers that had scented Ivy's first bath in the palace, the night her life had changed forever. So much had changed since then. Ivy had learned to read, to write, to navigate the complex politics of court. She had established homes for children who had been sold or abandoned, places where they would never know the cruelty she had endured. She had become the queen Ronan had always believed she could be, not despite her past, but because of it. She understood suffering, and she was determined to ease it wherever she could. Ronan appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "She has your stubbornness," he murmured, watching their daughter sleep. She has your snoring? He laughed softly, the sound vibrating through her. I do not snore. You absolutely do. I have 2 years of evidence. They stood there together in the soft light, watching the rise and fall of their daughter's tiny chest, and Ivy marvelled at the path that had brought her here. Do you remember what the Thornwoods told me? She asked quietly. When they sent me to you? I remember wanting to tear them apart. They told me to sleep on the floor, like a dog, like I was less than nothing. She turned in his arms, looking up at the face she loved more than anything in the world. And you said your bed was large enough. It was. He pressed his forehead to hers. It always will be. That was the first moment anyone had ever treated me like I mattered. Her voice was thick with emotion. The first moment anyone had ever seen me as a person instead of property. You changed everything, Ronan. You saved me. No. He shook his head gently. You saved yourself. I just gave you a safe place to do it. He kissed her softly. You were always strong, Ivy. You were always worthy. You just needed someone to believe it until you could believe it yourself. She thought about the girl she had been. Broken, invisible, sleeping on cold stone floors. And she thought about the woman she had become. Loved, powerful, worthy. The Thornwoods had sent her to the Lycan king as an insult, as a message, as property to be used and discarded. Instead, she had become his queen, his partner, his everything. I love you, she said. I love you, he answered, forever and always. They stood together in the doorway of the nursery, watching their daughter dream, and Ivy finally understood the truth that had taken her 20 years to learn. She had never been nothing. She had never been worthless. She had simply been waiting for someone to see her, for someone to choose her, for someone to show her the way home. And now, finally, she was there. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new tale of love, fate, and finding where you truly belong. Until next time.